Motion pictures, can't get enough. Cinephile, movie lover, and a big movie buff. Talking to actors, directors, innovators, athletes to writers, real trailblazers. Yeah, originator, not a duplicator. So honest, always authentic. Tune in, trust me, you don't want to miss it. This is the Monday Morning Critic. Amazing life journeys, great interviews from sports analysts, even reporters too. Captivating, always top content, bringing top quality. Everybody's talking. Yeah, originator, not a duplicator. So passionate and so authentic. Tune in, trust me, you don't want to miss it. This is the Monday Morning Critic. Woo!
Leave it to Beaver. Starring Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Tony Dow, and Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.
Welcome to episode 95 of the Monday Morning Critic. Today's guest is an actor, an entrepreneur, and believe me when I say he's an absolute American icon and legend. His name is Jerry Mathers. Jerry, you are making the guy on this side of the microphone so happy by being on the show today.
Well, thank you very much. You're making me very happy by letting me speak with you.
Oh, there's so much I want to ask you. So, I have to say before I get started, your beautiful and wonderful wife, Teresa, helped set this up, and she is one of the kindest people I've ever dealt with in over almost 100 interviews. She is so sweet.
Oh, that must not be my wife
then. She's so great. She's so great.
Yeah, she is a doll. She is a doll.
So I have to say, Jerry, 10/4 is my father's birthday, so it's a special day. But it's also
Happy
a special.
birthday to him.
Yeah, thank you. It's also special for another reason. Do you want to tell the listeners why?
Well, I think it would be the day probably that the first Leave It to Beaver aired, wouldn't it?
Yes, October 4th, 1957, 61 years ago, and it's still one of the best shows of all time. And I know you...
Actually, it's the longest running show in television history. It's never been off the air since in all that time. That's amazing.
And I know you get asked this next question a lot, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What's the secret, Jerry? Why does it work? Why is it, we're almost in, 2020, and this show is just still, like you said, longest running. What's the secret?
Well, it has a lot of secrets, but I think the best part of it, or what people, gravitate for, is that, it was real. It wasn't people writing jokes, and, a lot of the shows today, people just go into a room and they all bring their best jokes for the day and try to put them into a script. But Leave It to Beaver comes from real life. So all the things that happened in Leave It to Beaver actually happened to kids. So things that were happening in the 50s and 60s, well, some of those things came from even the 20s and 40s when those writers were growing up. So they're pretty timeless. They're things that really happened. I'm not saying exactly the same thing happened, but things around what the kind of things Beaver did. And they had a real good understanding. They had a whole bunch of kids between the two writers, Joe Conley and Bob Mosier, and they understood kids, and it was just a really good show. When I went on the interview for Leave It to Beaver, there was about 8,000 people on it, not just here in Los Angeles, but New York and Chicago. That just wasn't for the Beaver part. That was for Wally, Eddie, and a couple of the other, sundry characters. But so they did a lot of work before they came up with Tony Dow, Ken Osmond, who played Eddie Haskell, and myself, and their work paid off.
Yeah, well said. And I have to say, one of the things that you brought up, and I was going to ask you this a little later, was it is true that every episode in some way was based on actual events or something truthful that happened. That's correct, right?
Absolutely. It's not, that is absolutely right. And it wasn't just some of the episodes, and, everyone were things that actually happened to a kid. They just didn't want to go in and, a lot of the shows you write today or see today are joke shows, and they write jokes. No, these are things, and then they might find a joke that would fit into it, but if it didn't fit in, it wasn't just pushed in there so that it made people laugh.
Yeah, that's really well said. And Jerry, just one of the things that, I don't know if it's nostalgia or what, there's a golden age of TV. There's something that's so innocent and beautiful about it that we're never going to see again. And while it's amazing, it's history, it's top-notch television. There's also, I don't know, is sadness the right word? There's a little bit of sadness to it because it's a time that's come and gone, or am I being a little bit of a glass half empty type of person?
Well, I don't think it's come and gone. I think there's a lot of happy things happening in the world today. It was, in some ways, a simpler time. There weren't a lot of things that we have today, the internet and, the mass media communications and things. But there were a lot of things back then, too. So it was a different time, though. But Leave It to Beaver, all the stories are from real life. And, people come up to me and they say, my kid just did the same thing, or, my child did this, and I saw that on the show. And they hadn't even seen the show. And, it's just really about a boy and his brother growing up in America in the 50s. But I think it probably could relate, back to who knows when. And it's still relatable to kids because things that kids did in the 50s, they're doing now, and they were doing a long time before that.
Yeah, and when I said come and gone, I definitely didn't mean the effectiveness and the impact of this show. I meant kind of like, and your answer was perfect. I was referring more to the times, the not the television, like the 50s and 60s. It was more of an innocent time that has come and gone, and that's kind of the sadness in it, I think. But you're right, the show.
You know what? I think a lot of people think that, but I think that all times are pretty much the same. There were the same amount of pretty much good people and bad people, and sometimes when people look back, it's always better to look at the good things than to focus on the bad things that happen. I mean, you want to definitely know about the bad things so you can say, no, we're never going to do that again. But, the 50s were a good time, but the kids that are growing up today are also having a good time.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I had Don Most, he was on Happy Days, and I had David Newell.
Yes, I know him.
Yeah, and David Newell, who was on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And now I'm blessed to be able to talk to you. I don't know, I just feel like TV will never get as good as it was. I mean, I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying what you guys did, especially, your work on Leave It to Beaver, in my opinion, in my lifetime, will never be duplicated. And that's just my opinion.
Well, I think there's a very good reason for it. The writers were very, very good. Joe Conley and Bob Mosher were were the top writers in the industry at that time. But I think another thing that makes Leave It to Beaver have the staying power that it has is that all those things come from real life. So, yes, they were tuned up maybe or, modified, the things I did on the show, but all those things really happened to kids. I know a lot of the shows I watch today, and I do watch television. It's not like I don't watch television. Right. But a lot of them are jokes. They're trying to get in jokes, and so they twist the plot around so they can get in a joke, and then they put on the laugh track. And, I find it amusing sometimes, but other times I just go, oh, well, that's why they did this, because they wanted to get in that joke. But Leave It to Beaver, it has a storyline. You see Beaver, he either makes a mistake or he does the right thing. If he makes a mistake, there are consequences, and then they're not the end of the world, and he learns his lesson.
Yeah, that's really well said and thought out. And one of the things that, I wanted to ask you was, we look at, all these things that happen. We talk about how times have unfolded. You've been acting since 2 years old. I mean, before you even get to that show, before you even get to Leave It to Beaver, I want to say you were in something like 200 television episodes, and I want to say, I don't know how many movies. People assume that your first role was Leave It to Beaver. That's so way off.
Well, there's a good reason for that. It's that Leave It to Beaver has shown forever. It's never been off the air since October of 1957, and it shows all over the world. So it's not even in this country. It's all over the world, and I forget how many different languages, but it's multiple languages. And it's just a really good show. I think because it came from real life and it just wasn't a joke show with people just trying to get up there and tell topical or just, jokes that they thought would last for a while. It's really about a little boy growing up in America. But it doesn't have to be America because it plays all over the world. In fact, it's funny, like in Japan, they have a little girl dubbing my voice. So not so much speaking Japanese, but have a real high voice. But it's in Germany. It's, all over the world. And in a lot of places, that's how the American family was presented to the world, was through Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, it's true. And, you referenced earlier, you said, a lot of shows today, and you're right, try to go for that big laugh. And I know from my research on your life and your shows, the people involved with Leave It to Beaver made a conscious effort to not go for that big laugh. Why is that, you think, Jerry? Why was that the case?
Well, they just didn't want it to be a show that, it compromised it. Leave It to Beaver always has a message, and the message is very, very simple. And it's that if you do the right thing, things go well for you. If you don't, it's not the end of the world, because you can get it back, but you're going to have some problems. So when Beaver makes a bad choice, or his friends talk him into making a bad choice, there are consequences to your actions, and children have to realize that. Yeah, it'd be a great world if you were the only one in it, and you were the little king and could do whatever you wanted, but that's not the way life works for most of us.
Yeah, that's well said. And one of the things I couldn't wrap my head around is that you're a young kid at the time. You're definitely well-grounded, that's for sure. But the people that you have a chance to work with, Hitchcock, Bob Hope, Alan Ladd, and you're running into people like Cary Grant and Spencer Tracy on set. So I get it, you're a professional even as a young kid. Are you ever overwhelmed, Jerry? I mean, those are some of the biggest names ever. I don't know how many people could talk about personal experiences with Hitchcock, right? So, I
sat on Alfred Hitchcock's lap and read lines with him. I mean, it was very normal. I would go over there and he'd say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Mathers." And he was the very first person to ever call me Mr. Mathers.
Wow!
And I talked to him later because he came and did Alfred Hitchcock Presents on the Universal lot. And he still called me Mr. Mathers. And I said, and he said, "If you're an actor, you're a mister." But it was just, and so I had a lot of respect for him, and he was just a really, I hate to say this because it might destroy some people's thinking about him, but he was a fun person to be around. And I'd sit there and I'd study my lines, and, Shirley MacLaine and John Forsythe would come over and we'd all read the lines, and he'd say, "All right, yes, and let's go shoot it now." And it was kind of a nice experience because, when you're working on a set, it's on a studio set, but this was in Vermont. So we were out there and, we're in the countryside, and the ladies would bring blueberry muffins, and we'd kind of have a contest because he was a gourmet. And he'd go up and down the lines looking for the best one and pick one, and I'd always follow right behind him and go, "Oh, is that the one for today, Mr. Hitchcock?" And I'd usually get the very best, or maybe the second best, because even out of the best, he would pick the best. And it was just a really good time. And Shirley MacLaine's first movie, one of John Forsythe's first movies. So this was before Leave It to Beaver, so it wasn't like I was, somebody that even had a name or anything, and he just treated me very, very well.
Wow, and you almost have to have, Alfred Hitchcock almost has to have a good sense of humor to have, because of the content he puts. I mean, he's an absolute genius, but you almost have to be a fun person to kind of put that stuff out, don't you?
I think so. As I say, I always, it was kind of, strange for me because a lot of people were so afraid of him, and, I've heard, other things about him over the years, but I never had any problems like that. And I just knew him as this very nice man who, took very good care of me, taught me how to say lines, and said, "I think it would be better, Jerry, if you said it this way for this particular scene." And I would just do it, and he'd go, "That's very good, Mr." Always said Mr. Mathers.
Your story reminds me a little bit of Ted Williams, right? Because the show is doing great. Leave It to Beaver's on top of the world. But you know what? And please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. You walk away to focus on your education. You enlist, in the Air Force National Guard. My God, not many people would have done that, Jerry. I have to tell you, they would have stuck through it. You did it, and that speaks volumes about your character. Talk to me about that thought process. Talk to me about what's in your mind when you're at that time of your life.
Well, I had been working since I was 2 years old, so it wasn't like working on a series, even though Leave It to Beaver's, the longest running show in television history and everything, it was very popular. But I'd done movies with, Alan Ladd and Alfred Hitchcock and all sorts of different people that are very, very big stars. So it wasn't anything that was new to me, but I'd never been to a school. I had a private tutor from the first grade until the the 8th grade, and the 8th grade was high school. The other thing that I kind of missed out on was sports, because my dad was a coach. He retired as a superintendent at LA City Schools, but he was a coach, so sports were always kind of very big in my life. I had a basketball court in the backyard, or a basket I could shoot at, not a court, but and I loved sports, so I really wanted to be in school because I had a private tutor. So I didn't have any other people in the class. When I was in the 4th and the 5th grade, it was me and the teacher, and if I was good at certain math problems, she'd move on to the next. If I was having a little trouble with something else, we could stay on that for a week if we had to, until I was not only up to grade, but beyond it. So, it was a fun experience, and I really liked it, but I wanted to go and do some other things.
Yeah, and I know Dad is a military guy. Dad's also a coach. He retires as superintendent of schools. How much of Dad being a military guy affected your decision to go in the military?
Well, it was very, very definitely a big part of it, but I was always a military person. In fact, I have a collection of military items that people from the show of Leave It to Beaver, a lot of the guys gave to me, because they'd all been in World War I and World War II, and a lot of them had brought home souvenirs, which at that time really weren't any big deal, And one guy brought in one time a helmet, and he said, "Would you like this?" And it was a German World War I helmet. I said, "Oh, that's great." And I just started a collection, which I've collected ever since. So it was, but it was more like a huge family. People don't realize that when you're doing the show, they see, Tony Dow, Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Ken Osmond as Eddie Haskell, and, Frank Banks as Larry Rutherford, and Lumpy Rutherford. But, there was a whole crew behind there, and they all had families at home. And the thing about it, you can't make a kid work, so you want to keep them happy. So they'd come and they'd talk, and we'd tell stories, and, it was just a wonderful way to grow up.
Yeah, and it sounds like it. And, when I was researching your life, there's rumors galore. I mean, nothing bad, but just rumors galore. One of the things I read was...
The big one is probably that I've been killed. I was killed in Vietnam. and that was actually that was scary, because I was in the service at the time, and I was in the Air Force, and then the Air National Guard, but in the Air Force at that time. So I was doing a lot of flying, and there was a report that I had been killed in Vietnam, and I wasn't at home, and my mom and dad, were no more aware that I hadn't passed than the people that were reading it all over the country, because I don't know how it started. Everybody says, well, maybe it was this person with the same name or a similar name. I have no idea. I know it's not true, but, it was kind of scary. In a way, it was interesting, and I say interesting in a very strange way, but how many people reacted to it were just so touched by it. And, but it was hard. It's a big story if you're killed, but if you weren't killed, it's a little harder to get publicity to say, no, I'm not. I'm still here. Nothing really happened. You guys made a mistake.
Yeah, and you kind of read my mind. My question was kind of around that. It was the idea that, or the situation that you attempted to enlist in the Marines before you went into the Air Force and get into Vietnam itself. But after the Buffalo Bills,
yes, I did, because my dad was in education as superintendent at LA schools. But one of the things I had done, my summer camp, I used to go to a thing called Devil Pups, which was run by the Marine Corps, and I would go down to Camp Pendleton for 3 or 4 weeks every year. When I was I guess I was probably 10 or 12. So for 4 years, I spent time doing basically Marine training, and it was to get people to join the Marine Corps. So it was fun, and it was run by the reserves, the Marine Reserves, and they would have a guy that had been a Marine, was a regular Marine, but he was a reserve Marine, and we went down there, and I just had a good time. I loved the Marine Corps. But actually, when I did enlist, I enlisted in the Air Force because I wanted to be a pilot. And then I found out my eyes weren't quite good enough to be a pilot, so I ended up in doing other things. But I like the military. The military was very good for me, taught me a lot about discipline and, how to do a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have learned how to do without the military.
Yeah, the military is certainly the best of us, and you're a top shelf person, so you understand that. But I guess the question I had was, Buffalo Bills guard Bob Kelso passed away in Vietnam, and what I read is that you were also an American icon. You still are, obviously, but people didn't want to lose you as well. Is there any truth to that the Marines would not take you because they didn't want to lose you as an American icon, as this.
No, there was no truth to that at all.
Okay.
I joined the Air Force only because I thought I'd be able to fly, because my dad was actually, he was the recruiter for the Air Force Academy and retired as a colonel in the Air Force Reserve. So I came from a very military family. He'd been in World War II and did 25 missions over Germany. So I'd always grown up, and he was in the reserves when I was growing up. In fact, doing Leave It to Beaver, he would go to meetings once a month and then go to his thing. So it was something that we were a military family, and there was nothing wrong with it. There were a lot of people that were against the war and things like that, but I would have definitely have joined the Marine Corps had I had a chance.
Right. And one of the great things, I'm going to shift a little bit here to being on a wonderful show like Leave It to Beaver, one of the best of all time. And I love the fact that it's in black and white. I think that adds to its. I just love the way it looks, the way it feels. Is when you look back and on occasion when you do watch this show, it's almost like watching for those who were never actors, like home videos, right? Is it weird to say, okay, this is, a certain part of your life is documented on film? I mean, forget the popularity and the acting part. How does that part work? Is that kind of weird to kind of like look back?
It's a very simple thing. It's like you watching that 8mm, or maybe if you were really lucky, 16mm film that your parents took of a picnics that you went on, or
right.
Some of the highlight, maybe your graduation or things like that. I remember every week, because every show was different. We shot a show a week, so we'd come in on Monday, we'd read the script several times. Producers would hear how it sounded. We'd rehearse on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we'd shoot it. And so every week of that is a year of my life. And when I see an episode or I see a certain person, I say, oh, that's the only one they ever worked on, but that was a nice person. Or, that's the one with the alligator. That's the one with the go-kart, or this, So each one is just a week of my life. And if somebody had filmed you at school doing different things every week, you'd say, oh, yeah, that's the week the teacher gave me that word that I couldn't spell.
Yeah, and I guess I get your mindset now that I hear you say it, where you get to a point in your life where you're like, you know what, I want to go to Berkeley, I want to get a degree, and I want to do that, and I guess I understand it. And one of the questions I had for you, and I'm bouncing here a little bit back and forth, but when you go to Berkeley, you get your degree, I think it's in philosophy, right, Jerry?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and you go, wonderful major, you get a degree in philosophy. Obviously, you're well known. Is it tough to obtain a degree like that and go to class and not be bombarded by people? Is privacy an issue when you go get your degree like that?
Well, I was very lucky, because one of the things I also did was I joined a fraternity.
Okay.
Maybe if I had gone in as just a regular student and been, in a regular environment, but I had, and I did that because I had friends that were in that fraternity, both at Stanford and at Berkeley, from high school. So they said, well, if you come up here, you have to join the fraternity. And I thought, okay, I don't really want to be in a dorm. It'd be more fun to be with that. And so immediately I had basically a band of brothers. So, I got in, I joined the fraternity, we had dinner every night, breakfast every morning. And so it made for a lot better experience for me, because instead of being, first of all, at Berkeley and not knowing anybody, I had a lot of friends in the community too, because all the people that were in other fraternities all knew me, and of course I was always the social director, because I could meet a lot of girls very easily, so I was always in charge of all the social activities and getting people to come to our high school dances and things like that. So I had a very, very good experience at college. It was very hard for me. I'm not saying that Berkeley was easy, because I don't think Berkeley is easy on anybody.
Right.
But it was something that I'd always wanted to do, because I'd never been to school with other boys before, or girls especially.
Yeah, that's well said. And when people talk about Leave It to Beaver, I think a lot of the appeal is they just love the family. They love all of you guys. And I think kids that maybe had broken families at the time, they looked at Ward, they looked at June, and they wish that they had, and Wally and you, and they wish they were part of something like that. And I think you guys, in many ways were a family for those that didn't have a cohesive unit. I think you guys, for many kids, were the ideal family, even if it was just on TV. And I think that speaks volumes again, Jerry, about what kind of person you are, and also how special Leave It to Beaver is.
Well, I think a lot of that is the writers. They were very, very good. And also the other people they picked. Barbara Billingsley was, just probably one of anybody would want her for a mother, but especially Hugh Beaumont, because what Hugh Beaumont really was he was a fine actor, a very, very good actor. And before he was on Leave It to Beaver, a lot of people don't know this, but he was Michael Shane. Now, Michael Shane was this huge detective, and he's like a Mickey Spillane type character. When he wants information, he takes you by the collar and pounds you against the wall. So he's this big tough guy. In reality, he took all these parts as actors because he was a Methodist minister, and he was ministering to basically people that had drinking problems down in the worst part of L.A., and they couldn't afford a pastor, and he needed a part-time job, which acting was. And so when he started Leave It to Beaver, he didn't leave his ministry, but he had a little less time to do it. But that's why he became an actor, was to be able to be a minister.
Yeah, and one of the things I read great things about, nobody said anything bad about you guys, but doing research, one of the things I kept reading over and over was that he held some resentment because when he took the role, I think he lost a son and maybe a mother-in-law on the way in an accident or something like that. I didn't find that to be the truth. I just feel like that's almost like rumors. Not that it didn't happen, but that he held resentment.
It did. He owned an island in Minnesota, and he was driving back and got in a terrible accident. And anything that like that, of course, it devastated the family because they were all in the car.
Right.
And some people survived and some didn't. So it was, very, very hard on his family. I think it was hard on him, because it was in Minnesota. So it wasn't like, you had it in downtown Los Angeles where there was an ambulance there, within maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It took a long time, and they were there with these people. I guess it was a horrible wreck. I don't know that much about it, but I think it involved several cars and a truck. So it wasn't just his family. There were a lot of people in this wreck, and that was his dream, was to go and buy a part of Minnesota, and he had this island that he went there with his family, and he would spend the summer there with them, and he'd work very, very hard all year, and then to have something like that happen and lose members of his family, I think it just kind of it was just a horrible, horrible thing to happen to him. He was such a good and really gracious and wonderful person. It was very sad.
Yeah, and you were surrounded by wonderful people, and what was it like? So I know your real parents were great people. What was it like working with Hugh and Barbara? Were they like, I don't want to say a father figure because your father was your father figure, but were they role models to you? Did they ever take you aside and act like parents? Like, were they nurturing? How was that? Through the years, how did that unfold, Jerry?
I think the easiest way for other people to understand it, where they were like teachers. I knew that no, they weren't my parents, but I went in and I worked with them. But it wasn't like a teacher in some ways, because in a lot of ways I was one of their peers. We were all actors. We all had a lot of lines to say. We all had a lot of things to do. And, and it wasn't a time that you could, in some ways, be a kid. It wasn't a place where, if you were fooling around, you had 40 or 50 men there that had families at home. They all wanted to go home. You had to know your lines. You had to go in there, and you had to be professional. But when you were not working, it could be a very, very fun place to be. We had a basketball court that we'd shoot baskets with. We'd throw baseballs around because they wanted to keep us interested and happy, and also get us a little exercise. So it was a very, very fun place. And as I say, all the people on the show had kids, so they were happy to go out and throw the ball around. And I used to build a lot of boats, and I had boats that I'd find a piece of wood, and they'd send it down to the wood shop, and they'd cut it, and we'd paint it, and I'd go out to the lake, where a friend's lake on the back lot, and we'd sail these boats, and I just had a wonderful time. So I basically had my parents were great, but I also had a lot of surrogate parents.
And, I have to say, Tony Dow was 12 when he started the show. He looked 22. Like, he looked so much older than he was, right?
Well, I think that one of the reasons for that, and it's part of who he is and always was he was an AAU swimming and diving champ. So, I mean, he was really very, very buff. In fact, when I first started working with him, I kind of looked at him, and I wasn't around a lot of other kids, that were older than me especially. And, I mean, this guy had bulging muscles. He could take 4 steps, do a front flip, land on his feet, climb up a 50-foot diving board and do a swan dive and do 2 flips on the next dive. And I was thinking, gee, everybody does that, I guess, because Tony can do it. I don't think I'll be able to do that in a year or two.
And you're so kind to come on, and I have a few more questions for you. I'm excited about is your appearance at New England MegaFest, right? So that's one of the things that I'm very excited and happy about. And I know that you and Tony have done many Comic-Cons throughout the years. You're very close. You guys came back in 1983 to do a show together, which I'm going to talk about briefly. You guys have kind of grown to be brothers in real life. I mean, not just on television, but are you that close where you can almost call yourself brothers?
Well, I come from a big family. Now, Tony is kind of funny because he is actually the youngest in his family, and he has an older brother. I'm the oldest in my family. So I would say he's more like a best friend.
Gotcha.
Because they're family ties, and I knew his mother, I knew his father, I knew his older brother, he knew my family, and we've been friends for life. And so I wouldn't say though it's quite the same bond as you have with a family member.
Right, and one of the things that I cannot let go, I have to bring this up. So the term, obviously, we know that Leave It to Beaver, longest running show in history, one of the best shows in history. But it also generated the term Eddie Haskell, right? Because everyone knows an Eddie Haskell in life, right? So, I mean...
Hopefully not, but I'm afraid it's true.
Yeah. So we all know, anybody that's bought a new or a used car recently knows that. It's like... that term has kind of grown. It's unbelievable how popular
it's come to identify a certain type of person. And I've had people tell me that my whole life, and they said, before I even met you sometimes, I knew people that were Eddie Haskells, and we used to call it, they'd say, he's an Eddie Haskell.
So I have a few questions.
You got the laugh down.
So I have a few more questions for you. I can't thank you enough. So I have a few true-false questions for you. I need you to confirm if these are true or false. Did the writers tell you and Tony not to watch the show so it wouldn't inflate your ego and you guys wouldn't get too big in the head?
I don't think it was that. They just didn't want a lot of people. They didn't want us watching it because they didn't want us to think that, I didn't get enough time on the show, or maybe I should have said that line different. So in a way it was that. But it was also considered an adult program. It wasn't like it was, something that kids couldn't watch. But Leave It to Beaver was on like at 8:30 at night sometimes on weeknights. So it wasn't really considered when it was on for its first 6 years to be a children's show. So I think that also had something to do with it.
Right, and
they wanted us to bed because we had to be back at the studio by 7:30 the next morning.
Speaking of Eddie Haskell and Ken Osmond, who seems like a great guy,
absolutely,
yeah. The one rumor I read, and I knew was obviously silly, was that he was Alice Cooper, which is ridiculous. But the one that I read that really almost threw me off my feet was that he was shot. He's an L.A. police officer. He was an L.A. police officer, obviously retired now, but was shot 3 times. That's correct, right?
Well, yes and yes, but it's the reason I say yes and yes. Yes, he was an L.A. police officer. He was shot, but he was shot 3 times in the same incident.
Okay.
But he was a motorcycle cop, which is I have police officers in my family, sheriffs, and he was a motorcycle cop, and that's the most dangerous part of police work. If you're in a car, a lot of times at least you have a partner. He not only was doing that kind of work, but he was down in the worst part of L.A. He was down in basically, the place where all the drunks congregate down in L.A. And he is just, he was a tiger. He'd go and he walked up to a car and, knocked on the window because the guy had been driving too fast, and the guy had just stolen it, and he shot him 3 times in the chest. It hit a flak vest. But I didn't realize. I thought, a flak vest. Well, that, you just walk away. It's like, you're like a robot. It went into the flak vest, and he actually has a hole, 3 holes in his finger that you can pretty much, if you wanted to, I didn't never want to, but he'll show them to you, where you could stick your finger where, it's separated ribs and things like that. So he was a police hero, and they said, okay, now you can come back to a desk job. And he went, nope, if you don't put me back on the street, I'm going to retire. And they put him back on the street. So he was definitely not only nothing like Eddie Haskell, but a police hero.
Wow, yeah, and he dealt with a lot of Eddie Haskell's, is that true? You beat out nearly 4,000 kids for the role?
Something like that, but honestly, it wasn't that role. It was all the roles, because there was, the Wally role and Eddie and Lumpy. So there would probably be 4 parts, and so they would separate the kids a little bit. But everybody went on the interview. It wasn't like they just said, we just want to see people that are, the Beaver. So they had Beaver and his friends. So they were picking Beaver and his friends. And that was 4,000 people. And then for Wally, who was older, they had another 4,000.
Yeah, and it's amazing how well you and Tony have done amazing, because I said entrepreneur at the beginning. You've done some amazing things with your life. Tony is a sculptor, done amazing things. Usually when you hear about a show, you hear about tragedies and this and that. You guys really were, knock on wood, kind of tragedy-free. You did have Rusty Stevens. Is that true that his mother kind of forced the writers to write him out of the show?
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a career choice. He did. I believe it was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof with Elizabeth Taylor.
Okay.
And they thought that he could go on and have his own show, and wouldn't probably be like the Larry Mondello show, but they just thought he was going to have a big movie career, and it was a career choice for them, and so it wasn't like he left, with any bad feelings or there was some problem with him. They just thought, well, he's not going to be the Beaver,
right,
and it's not going to be the Larry show, so maybe we should go out and try to, further his career, because he's done a lot of movies. He's done movies now, and, maybe he could have a better career.
And the other only thing that I wanted to bring up was Stanley Fafara passing away way too early in life, and that's the other thing. It's just, it seems like you guys were a close-knit family as a cast, and you hardly ever see that anymore.
Well, we were. We were all very, very good friends, and that was a very hard time when he did pass away. He had problems with narcotics, and at that time, that was the late 60s, and, a lot of people did, and he just made some bad choices, and it in a way, it was a wake-up call, not for me particularly, but for a lot of people that, that there were consequences. Yeah, you could live a certain lifestyle, but there were very, very definitely consequences that might be, as he did, mean that you'd pass away.
Well said. And Jerry, I have to say, one of the most underrated shows in history, and I'm not saying this because I'm speaking with you, is still The Beaver, that aired from 1983 to 89. I'm trying like hell to find out where I can watch this again. I want to go through all of it. Is that possible for me to do?
Well, I'd like to tell you an even sadder story. I'd like to see the new Leave It to Beaver that I spent basically 7 years of my life doing, which is 100 episodes. The movie of the week is what you were talking about. And then after that, we went and did 100 episodes. It took us about 6 years. It was a very, very good show. It was a joint venture between Universal Studios, MCA, and Ted Turner. It showed one time on Ted Turner. And, of course, one of the things it was very much, a lot of people loved it, is because it was in color, where all the old Leave It to Beavers, because they were all in black and white, and they lost it.
Oh,
so
my
it was almost
God.
$1 billion project, and no one can find it. Everybody always says, well, it'll show up someday. Well, it's been quite a few years now. We made the movie of the week in I think it was 82, if I remember, 81 or 82. So, and then we went on to make 100 episodes after the movie of the week. It showed one time, and then a few of them over the summer while we were coming back would show. So a few of them showed twice, but it's gone. No one's ever seen it since.
No, you know what? I meant this year. I was looking at IMDb. I think they have it backwards. It was definitely the new Leave It to Beaver, because I remember when I was younger, and I watched it today, because I was thinking about how much the show's changed, because there's a scene where you're in Wally's office. Wally plays your attorney, and you're talking about, filing for divorce. You're talking about custody of your kids, and I was like, wow, it's just a sign of the times how much things have changed. Do you remember that scene that I'm talking about?
Very definitely, and it was a really good show. And of course, that's probably not one of the highlights of it, but we wanted to show that there were things going on in families.
Sure.
The Cleavers weren't going to have this the golden life. Wally had 2 kids. He had a girl, so we also had a girl. I had 2 boys that were basically Wally and the Beaver's age. We had Barbara Billingsley, June, and she was the grandmother. We did put a few clips in from Hugh Beaumont because sadly he had passed, who played Ward on the original show. Ken Osmond was on it. So it was just a really good reboot of the show, and people always had said, if you could just do another one and bring it up to times. Well, we brought it up to times, and somehow they lost it. I don't really understand how you lose a project of that much money, and when people spend that many years of their lives doing it. I was getting up at 5 and 6 in the morning to be at the studio and working. I found out what Barbara and Hugh used to have to do, because they shoot all the kids with the scenes because they can only work from either 8 to 5 or 9 to 6. And then after that, you come back and do all your close-ups in the other ones. So I spent a lot of hours at that studio, getting up early in the morning and working late at night and getting up early the next day. Showed one time on Turner Broadcast, and no one can find it.
And maybe it's the movie of the week that because I'm looking at.
It would have been the movie of the week.
Yeah, and I was looking at both, and I was looking at the clips too. I was looking at, Jerry, some of the actors that were in this. Oh my God! It was Giovanni Ribisi, Nicole Eggert, Christina Applegate, Shannon Doherty, Stephen Dorff, Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, and Joaquin Phoenix. Like you guys were way ahead of the time, even then too.
Well, the writers were very, very good. They came out of the Happy Days. They were the head writers for Happy Days, and so we went around and we looked for the very, very best writers. And since Leave It to Beaver had such a good reputation, it was easy to find them. And when you have the good writers, and we'd hand out scripts to people, and they'd go, "I've got to be in this." So in reality, and I'm not going to tell you who, but there were a lot of people who were names like that we couldn't get in because there just weren't enough spots.
Wow. And you've given me so much of your time. You're such a classy person, Jerry, but I have to tell you, I'm a little sad, and I told you this off the air. You're going to be at New England Super Mega Fest at the Sheraton Framingham Hotel, October 13th, 10:30 to 6 p.m., October 14th. And the 14th, 10:30 to 5 p.m., I was going online today because one of the options is you can obviously get autographs and pick photographs with, I believe, you and Tony, right?
Yes.
Yep, and they're available. And there's a cool option they had that I've never seen offered before at any Comic-Con, where people can have dinner with you guys and just talk, and just like we're doing now, it's sold out. But you know what? People can still go. They can talk to you. They can get autographs. They can get photographs. I am so happy you're going to be about an hour and a half away from me. I'm so happy you're coming to the area. Is this your first time coming to something like this, or Massachusetts?
No, I've been to Massachusetts many, many times, but not for this. This will be my first time there, and I look forward to it. As I say, I've done things in Massachusetts. I spoke. I have diabetes, and I've spoken at different places, but those were more focused for people with diabetes. So this is something where it's just for fans. So I'll be more than happy to sign autographs for them, meet them, and greet them, and just have a good time. And people I get a lot of fan mail, to be honest with you, and people say, "Well, how can I meet you? How can I get a signature? How can I get a picture? I want to get a picture with you." You can do all those things, and take home a souvenir of me shaking your hand or me signing an autograph for you.
Yeah, let me say that one more time. Jerry will be at New England Super Mega Fest October 13th and 14th from 10:30 to 6, and then 10:30 to 5 on the 14th. Go, say hello, get your picture, get an autograph. Before I let you go, Jerry, I have to ask you, because it's a big part of your life. You've been a big advocate for this, and I'm so sorry I didn't ask you this earlier. Talk about what happened with your diabetes scare, because it almost cost you your life.
Oh, very definitely. And I was like a lot of people in this country. I thought I was leading a good life. I was, working as an actor. I did the new Leave It to Beaver, and we did that. And I acquired a couple businesses. One of them was a catering business. And so I had cooks, and we were doing studio catering. So we were doing large parties in groups every day, and I was going out and eating. And I put on a lot of weight. And I thought, this is the good life. I'm making a lot of money. I'm having a wonderful time. This food is wonderful. And I have a very good friend that's a doctor, and she started looking at me and said, Jerry, you're putting on a lot of weight. And I said, yeah, but, I feel great. She says, well, no, you can't put on that much weight, Jerry. And I said, this is what I've always dreamed of, being happy and healthy. And she said, you're not healthy. Come in for a physical. So for Christmas, she gave me a free physical. She told me I had probably 3 to 5 years to live because I had raging diabetes. Now, I had no symptoms, nothing that I could tell. And so I said, well, what can I do? She said, well, if you have a chance, because we caught it fairly early, you could lose the weight. So I lost the weight. I went from about 210, 215. I'm now down at about 170-some pounds, 75 pounds.
Wow.
And I'm now pre-diabetic. But
wow.
I just want people to know that when you carry that extra weight, diabetes, heart disease, there are a lot of things that come along with carrying all that extra weight. You may think you're having a good time and living the good life, but the good life may not last very long.
No, and Jerry, how tough was it to lose that weight?
It was tough, except I have kids, I have a wonderful wife, and I thought to myself, this is something that what they told me was, not only do you have diabetes, but you're going to shorten your life by quite a bit. And I said, no, this is not going to happen. They said, well, you have a chance because we caught it early. Maybe if you took off the weight. And so I was on insulin for a very short amount of time. And as I say, right now I'm pre-diabetic, but I always have that propensity to go back to being diabetic if I put on weight or don't do what I need to do. And if I do, that's fine. I wouldn't mind taking insulin. Living is a wonderful thing. So it's not like it's the worst thing in the world, but since I've been able to avoid it, it's better.
His name is Jerry Mathers. Jerry, I can't even tell you how appreciative I am that you came on today. I am so honored. You're such a wonderful human being. I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, well, thank you for letting me be on your show.
And guys, you can meet Jerry at the New England Super Mega Fest. He's a super guy. Please come out and say hello. Jerry, thanks for coming on the show and being a guest on the Monday Morning Critic.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Have a wonderful day.
Leave It to Beaver. Starring Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Tony Dow, and Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.